Hi, and welcome to the World Beyond Belief. My name is Paul Marco, and we're going to have fun today. Usually, we've been delving into really deep, heavy, almost tragic topics. We've been working with targeted individuals, and we've been hosting the Techno Crime Stoppers Forum, which is great for targeted individuals, and it's great for all of us to know what they're doing, what the deep state is doing to shut up people who don't think the way they do. Those are heavy topics. Today, we're going to have some fun. I have as my guest Jamie W. Lee. Now, I don't know whether you know Jamie, but we've been exchanging things with our different blogs. He posts stuff for us, we post stuff of his, and we've been kind of on the same page here. Certainly on the same page in terms of this topic, which is the flat Earth. And I think it's such a fun topic. It's an awakening topic. This topic, rather than trailing on what they're doing in pedophilia and all the horrible things, I think, this is part of the Grand Awakening. And this is the Grand Awakening that they have to create the counterinsurgency to balance. So we're going to talk with Jamie. Jamie's an expert at this. He's just written a new book out that I just had the pleasure of spending the weekend with, and it was a lot of fun. And we're going to talk to him about the flat Earth and other potatoes, and maybe we'll get involved in. He's discovered some new things on the different currencies that he's been folding. But let me welcome Jamie W. Lee to the World Beyond Belief. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for having me on your show. I love your work, and I appreciate all your activism and going into those dark places that few are willing to go but need to go to really stop the madness. And I agree with you. I think Flat Earth is the greatest awakening in 500 years for humanity, and that we're on the wave of bringing this to people and opening up their minds to what I call an alternative reality. Is just I feel blessed. I feel cursed. It's both it's wonderful, but it's exciting. It's also, you have to take a lot of abuse, right?
Well, it is an alternative reality, and it's a reality that the controllers can't allow to exist because it's going to interfere with their plans, and it traces back and it blows apart a lot of their plan, their Darwinist evolution. A lot of that stuff all hinges on us being on a spinning ball flying through the universe, and is insignificant as a flea on the back of a dog. So this changes everything. It changes perspective. I had a question. I want to start off. How did you first discover and get into the flat Earth, Jamie?
Can I reverse that and ask you to tell first?
Okay, I will tell.
How did you get into flat Earth?
How did I get into flat Earth? Mindy and I. Well, we were doing a little podcast it was a World Beyond Belief, but we were working it through Blog Talk. And we had, people listen to us, not millions, but we had people listen to us, and they said, oh, you have to look into the flat Earth. Well, we fluffed it off. That's ridiculous. And then I read something by Max Egan, and he said, "Oh, it's just a diversion to break up the awakening masses." So, but we kept getting asked. So we thought, well, we owe it to the viewers that we had to investigate it. So we spent a week investigating the flat Earth, and at the end of the week, we thought, well, we have to hold two different concepts. I mean, it's so scientifically provable, and we couldn't find anything on the other side that was scientifically provable. So we said we're going to have to hold them concurrently, and everything we hear, we're going to have to apply it to both models. Well, after a couple months, and we made a video like that.
Right.
Well, after a couple months, we actually physically moved to the flat Earth, and it's a physical movement. Your mind, it just gets rewired to the environment, and you cannot see the ball Earth. The ball Earth does not make sense anymore. Your senses, all your science, everything doesn't make sense. And you know the NSA, not the NSA, NASA is a bunch of liars. I mean, I knew that before I even thought of the flat Earth. I knew that they hadn't been to the moon. So
Right.
it was really difficult. And once you move in, that's why there's so many flat Earth videos every week, because what happens is while you're sitting on the flat Earth, you see holes in their program. And so that's why people who've never made a video before are making flat Earth videos, because it's so
Well, did you
obvious.
try and shoot holes? Did you try and shoot holes in the flat Earth first, and then that's how you came to it, or did you find, like, you looked into, like mine? I was flying a plane. I got Eric Dubé's book, and I was flying in December 2014, right after his book came out, and I'm reading it on the plane, and the Earth is supposed to be spinning as I'm going from San Francisco to Hawaii underneath me at 1,000 miles an hour. I'm going, why do I get to Hawaii in an hour instead of 5 hours? Same distance it takes to go to New York.
Yeah.
If it's spinning beneath me west to east. And now that started, and then I spent like my vacation in Hawaii just researching, and it's never stopped since. And I just couldn't disprove it. You know, I kept saying, you know, at first, this is ridiculous. And then I'd go back to his book, and then I'd look up more stuff, and it's just like it was something like you just had to come to that conclusion. And then by January of 2015, the end of it, I started the first ever Flat Earth website, but I didn't want to call it Flat Earth because I thought the plain truth was more appropriate as a name, because it just, once we find aeroplane, sea level, plate tectonics, I mean, the names are right in front of us, horizontal. It's just so obvious. And then, like you said, the brain has to get rewired, and the body follows. It's an amazing process.
Yeah, and after your flight to Hawaii, that pilot has to be pretty good, because he's landing on an airfield that's traveling at 1,000 miles an hour. So he's got to somehow catch it up, and I mean, it just doesn't make sense. No, we tried to debunk it. We spent a week or two looking for things that would debunk it. Now, you can find things that'll debunk it, but it's produced by like the Discovery Channel. And I don't think that's an objective source. I think that's an owned public source. So anyway, so we became flat earthers after that, and you know, I've had interviews that stopped interviewing me because I said we believe that the Earth is flat, and that's so crazy. But now I don't think it is. Every day, I find more people on YouTube that were like Michael Tellinger. They were just people that I admired, that they discovered that there's a truth here. That's interesting.
Well, and Santos Bonacci, I mean, I have great respect for Santos Bonacci too in doing his investigative work. And Michael Tellinger's come out and said, you know, he came out with his piece and said, I said my piece, I'm not going to say anything anymore, because in his community of respected archaeologists and historical narratives of ancients, he's gotten discredited for speaking to flat Earth. I mean, the mind programming, and this is one of the things I really delved into, which not a lot of flat earthers, like I don't know anybody else that's going into the 500-year history of the lie. You know, when did heliocentrism start? Why did the story change? How did the story change? Who changed the story? And that's what I worked on in 500 years. And I don't know anybody else that's gotten back to the original sources of the story that changed it, and why they changed it, and why the story now, like in 1999, Men in Black, the movie, comes out with Will Smith and what's that other actor guy, and they're talking about flat Earth. You know, 500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was flat. Men in Black, one of the big, huge movie, and then we've got Obama in 2011, before flat Earth became in 2006, I believe, the Flat Earth Society is resurrected, and all of a sudden they've got their Flat Earth Society website. And then in 2011, you've got Obama, you know, saying we don't have time for the flat earthers, comparing it with climate change. And then all of a sudden, 2014, Eric Dubé comes out with Flat Earth Conspiracy in November. 2 months after, he comes out with the dinosaurs are a hoax. And then he comes out with nuclear hoax. And I mean, those are just bomb after bomb. This 32-year-old kid in Thailand is releasing this stuff. I'm going, whoa, this is just like off the charts. Like, you know, I thought 9/11 was the discovery, and here this is just a whole nother level. And then the movement exploded from there. And you know, I watched the whole flat Earth start, and then all of a sudden, all these other sites, Mark Sargent, Patricia Steers, I mean, all these people that are getting all the YouTube hits and everything, they just came out of nowhere. Mark Sargent in one day came out with 10 videos that were an hour and a half long, professionally done, and it just like they were pumping up the volume, but they weren't going into the 500-year history of how this all got started, who started it, why would they do such a thing? It's always been just kind of like the information, like versus heliocentric and versus geocentrism, but not about, you know, the conspiracy behind the conspiracy type of thing. And Dubé will only go as far as the Freemasons. And when I went to him and I sent him private emails like, why won't you talk about Father Jorge Lemaitre, who wrote the Big Bang Theory, not Albert Einstein, as we've all been told, and Jesuit priest? Why don't we talk about Pope Paul III's book? Copernicus dedicated his book. He was a priest, dedicated his book to Pope Paul III. Why don't we talk about Newton's Principia book that everybody bases gravity on? The 4th edition was edited by the Jesuits. I mean, the church is behind this whole heliocentric theory story, and they were supposedly being the bad guys, right? It's the classic misdirection. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's really made clear in your book. Now, the name of your book is Flat Earth. What's the byline after that?
Well, you know, I had 2 bylines, and you picked up the second one that I put on the inside cover because I was between 2 places, whether making it a religious book on flat Earth, kind of like as the main theme, and it was the title that I was working on for a while was Investigations into the 3 Abrahamic Religions to Modern Society, going from the ancient times, and now it's titled Investigations into 500 Years of a Heliocentric Lie, because I think that is more attractive on the cover, as people are investigating lies now, because everything is a lie, nothing is true. That's the title of my next book coming out. And I think once you take that skepticism into investigation, where you're just investigating without opinion or belief, it's a much more open way of investigation, rather than starting with religious backgrounds, which always pushes buttons with people, kind of thing. And I meant to push buttons religiously in this book too. I speak to all the Christian quotes and all the Quran quotes that are in the Quran and the Bible, and then I also go into the astrotheology, which Santos Bonacci gets into, where as above, so below. What we're inwardly feeling in I call the inward Christian, and the outward Christian is actually expressed in the heavens as well. So I kind of wanted to bring the whole inside the dome and outside the dome into this book, and then also just make the case that we've been building over 2 years, and try and present it into an all-in-one kind of like format, where people can just use it as a platform to investigate further.
Oh, I think it answers a lot of questions too. There's not a civilization before 500 years ago that bought the spinning ball through limitless space kind of concept. And, you know, if you've lived on the flat Earth for a while, that becomes ludicrous. And you realize how these ancient peoples, their cosmology is all built around the flat Earth. What they could see, what they could feel, what they could test. I mean, it's more scientific than scientific. The people that took it apart were the Jesuits, basically. Even the Jesuits took the Chinese history apart and put the Chinese on a spinning ball. Just 200 years ago, I think. But
well, it was actually 1540 is when the St. Ignatius of Loyola was founded, with Pope Paul III, after they had been kicked out of, they got kicked out of 83 countries. They've taken the story of anti-Semitism, Jewish, and they've made that the story so they can hide behind the actual culprits behind this whole heliocentric story. And it's always blame the Jews, but nobody even knows what a Jesuit is that I talk to. And so they've hidden this from us for so long. They made themselves after the bad guy. And now, like you said, I mean, we have 5,000 years of what I call Theocosmology, because it was spiritual what their beliefs were in the flat earth cosmology. And there was many dimensions to their heavens and hells. I mean, this wasn't just life on earth. We're just dense beings that, like, you know, I believe we're spirit beings in a dense body, and that our spirit is still here. And 5,000 years, I mean, we have the Toltecs, the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Native Americans, all of them, most all of them that I've discovered, all had flat earth theocosmology. And then we have the Norwegians, the Nordic Vikings, they had their theocosmology. And then we have the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Sumerians, you know, all of these ancient cultures, the ancient Hebrews, all had flat earth theocosmology. So I feel, Paul, like this whole flat earth is bringing us back home. It's bringing us back to our reality of who we really are, the most powerful creation of this wonderful co-creation, and we're the center of it, because it's here to help us develop ourselves as to being a higher conscious beings to help all. And so once we realize this, wow, that's why they hid it from us in the darkness, is so that we wouldn't realize the potential of each human being. You know, it's powerful stuff.
That's why they can't have it out there. The thing that I noticed is astrology, which is connecting human beings to the powers above, to the powers below, is severed 500 years ago, and they changed it into astronomy. Astronomy is just planets floating out there in relative distance to us, but astronomy is. Astrology is human beings' path and guidance from powers above that was measured and watched for thousands of years. So they severed that. The religion severed that.
Right.
Something, you know, something that really should be reinforcing our spiritual connection, severed that, so that we're now floating on a ball in the middle of nowhere, and Mars, and the actions and the movements of Mars have nothing to do with us. You know, it's all just, they've raped us. It was a rape by the Jesuits, and probably other people that you know, 500 years ago. And it was complete and total, and they did a great job. Because, I mean, what percentage of the population do you think believes in the ball, and which percentage of the population are now flatters?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I find it interesting. Like, we had like 3 weeks ago, we're in April 2017 now, but a few weeks ago, I don't know if you saw, when all of a sudden this meme, I mean, you see the flat earth get released in November 2014. The subject goes nuts. Google Trends in 2016, I believe, had one of the biggest Google trend increases, was the flat earth meme. And then a few weeks ago, we see this basketball player right after NBA All-Star, right after Kyrie Irving, starts talking about flat earth. And then Shaq O'Neal, the basketball player, who's also a Freemason, got him in his Freemason apron and stuff, comes out and starts talking about flat earth. And then the next Friday night, there's a very popular left liberal TV show called, I think it's Real Time with Bill Maher. And he starts talking about the idiocracy of how can you believe flat earth with, you know, talking these basketball players, how weird is that? And then 2 nights later, Dave Chappelle, Mr. You know, anarchist against the system, apparently he went to Africa because they were trying to make him dress like a girl. He didn't want to do it. He's on Jimmy Kimmel kind of saying, oh, these flat earthers are all kind of weird. So within 2 weeks, we've got Sports Illustrated, Washington Post, they're all commenting online about flat earth. Well, I would have thought my website and all these sites would have gone nuts with people investigating that have never heard flat earth before, clicking on the links and looking for information on flat earth. And it didn't I got, you know, a kick of 500 to 1,000 on my views, but I looked at these other sites and nobody got like a massive kick of the entire, you know, people that have turned into the NBA basketball going, what are they talking about flat earth? And you know, I don't know down where you are, but where I am, you ask somebody a question and now all they do is go to their smartphone and hit Google and they look up the subject matter and come up with information. And so I'm kind of wondering, you know, how did this all, you know, last few weeks, why isn't this thing just going more nuts than it is on flat earth memes? But like you said, on the YouTubes, I'm just seeing a proliferation of YouTubes. And I guess I'm not on Facebook, and I guess Facebook's going nuts on it too. But it's just interesting, Paul, how this stuff is spreading, and it's being spread in our own individual computers, where we research it, find out for ourselves, and then go, how am I going to talk about this? Everybody's going to think I'm crazy. You know, how are we going to even say anything to anybody? And then that's the work, is now we got to bone up, learn our stuff, and then we got to go taking it to the streets, taking it to our family. I've been asked to leave a Thanksgiving dinner for bringing up stuff, you know, so it's an interesting place we're in.
It is. That's why I hate to keep plugging this book, but I had such fun with it over the weekend. If you had that book, we'll take it with you to Thanksgiving dinner, because it's got all the facts and information in there. I mean, it's really pretty comprehensive. I enjoyed it, and I learned a lot of stuff from it. But in terms of what they're doing, I think how they try to absorb things that are counter to that. It's kind of like a counterinsurgency. First of all, they ignore. Second of all, they ridicule. That's the stage we're in now. So Shaquille O'Neal can make fun of it and blah, 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 blah. They can have their good laugh. But the movement's growing. If you can get your head out of scientism and get it into science, you can see what's happening. Then I think the next stage will be a serious dispute. So they'll have somebody. I don't think they can do Neil deGrasse Tyson. I think he's made a laughing stock in the flat earth community. And who's the other guy? The science guy. So they're going to have
Bill Nye the Liar.
Yeah,
Bill Nye the Liar.
Yeah, they're going to have to wield out somebody who's got some credibility science-wise. Probably somebody out of NASA, maybe an astronaut, and they'll have a serious science thing. And then generally what they do is they say, oh yeah, we knew it all the time, but it's not the way you think it is. I don't think they can do that with this, because I think their plans for the future depend on people thinking they're a meaningless bug-like creature sticking to the side of a ball, flying through an infinite universe, is about as insignificant as a microbe, you know. When we find out what we are, go ahead.
I was just going to say on that point, it's so important to take that. You know, remember Carl Sagan, billions and billions of planets around this universe, and that set the meme back in the 90s for us to think we're just in a little corner of this insignificant little galaxy, and the insignificant with an infinite expansion Earth going at 186,000 miles a second, or 32 trillion miles a year. Put that one in here. I mean, this is what they do. They make the numbers so big, Paul. And this is what I try and get into and make a point in the book too, is the law of ridiculous numbers. And once we get past 100 miles an hour, that's all humanity can relate to. Has anybody gone 100 miles an hour with their head out the window? No, not really, unless you're a race car driver or something. So they say 1,000 miles an hour to a trillion to 36 quadrillion miles away. They're reading a little radio beam sent out by the Hubble telescope, going through all the asteroids and all the gravity pulls and all the comet dust and everything. And the radio beam's coming back from 36 quadrillion trillion miles. And they can tell the orbit of the Earth. They can tell the water makeup. They can tell the relativity to other. I mean, give me a break. I mean, just everything. It just is just made up in their lives for so long. And I trace it back to 1850s. When the dinosaur hoax came out, when the oil thing, dinosaur oil came out, the word dinosaur started in 1847, and that's when the whole Darwinism came out. That's when the public education system started. And if we get into the fallen angels, that's also when the fallen angels came down, the war of heavens down to earth, if you want to get biblical. And this is when all this stuff seems to have started. They waited until the 1850s with the Royal Institute of Astronomy was created and Newton was made the president of, to start selling the whole heliocentrism. And what they did was they came out with a painting by a guy named Ricci, who was also a Jesuit, and he showed two balances, like a Libra scale. And one balance was the Earth going around the sun, and the other was the sun going around the Earth. And so they took out the flat Earth debate entirely, and they just made it a conversation about whether we go around the sun or the sun goes around us. And that's what all the proofs became. And then when the Morley experiments came out and debunked basically that we have ether, we don't have air, it's called ether, And that's where electromagnetism is, and that's why we have free energy, and that's what Nikola Tesla discovered in 1910, which we all have free energy, but they won't give it to us. So they changed the story starting from the 1850s in modern time, and when the industrial devolution, as I call it, started, we all became technologically advanced, quote unquote, and that's when they started to own the story by going out to the public schools, putting globes in every classroom starting at kindergarten, and the whole, just images of just massive images. We learn by images, or we get programmed by images. They spent billions and billions of dollars every single year on brain mapping. What they're studying is between our ears and behind our eyes, and spending billions and billions of dollars. Well, what do you think business marketing companies learn? What do you think governments that want to control our minds learn? They learn everything about our behavior. They learn everything about how we work. They know more about how we do things than we do. And now they have these like Amazon Echoes and Home Nest that sit in our homes and record every conversation. They get us doing what they want us to do. It's absolutely amazing. And so I started looking into more of the geocentrism versus heliocentrism. And this is really interesting, Paul. I just discovered these books about 2 months ago, and I just ordered them. It's by a PhD doctor named Robert A. Sungenis. Now, Robert A. Sungenis, and first of all, it's called Sungenis is his last name, Sungenes. Get it? Sungenis, Genesis. So this guy put out this book, Geocentrism 101, An Introduction to the Science of Geocentrism, 4th edition, in October 2015. Then he's got a book, Geocentrism 102, An Introduction to the History of the Church versus Galileo. Then he's got another book out called Galileo Was Wrong, and then he's got a novel called Copernicus Theory. It's a novel of that Copernicus. It goes into the Catholic Church, and these two kids try and prove the science teacher wrong about heliocentrism, and it's at the Catholic Bellarmine School, and Father Bellarmine was the one that came out with the geocentric story. And so here's these books coming out of nowhere in 2013, before Dubé's book on geocentrism, and it's written by a Catholic PhD. Its publishing company is called the Catholic Apologist Publishing Company. So I believe they're going to come out and say they're going to start arguing between whether it's flat or whether it's a geocentric sphere, because they're staying in with satellites and that we can go out into space and stuff, but they're saying that we go around, or the Earth, or it's really a sunrise and sunset. That's another language oddity. Why do we use the words sunrise and sunset? So I've got this theory that they're going to start arguing whether it's we go around it and it's a sphere, or the sun goes around us and it's a sphere, or whether it's flat, and get us arguing about that next. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, as long as we can stick with what the flat earthers do, is they do science. As long as we stick with science, I think we'll be able to prove or disprove. You did a cool thing about horizon, Horus, sunset, and you did an amazing. You point to this one illustration that you referred to before, and it's like a comprehensive mind screw for geocentrism, and you take it apart piece by piece. It's a real interesting part of your book. I also want to divert and go into this energy thing, because that is another reason why they can't have a flat Earth. Because flat Earth works on electric. It's a you have a real cool thing in your book. It's like world and world, WORLD and WHIRLED. Why is that a synonym? Well, it's a synonym because it all talks about the energy that keeps this thing going. That's what keeps the sun up there. That's what keeps the moon up there. And we could have that energy if people would wake up to the flat Earth and realize that it's an electric model. We're part of an electric model. It's not like we need oil. It's not like we need to burn stuff. We're part of an electric model. You want to riff on that a little bit? Because I thought that was fascinating in your book.
Well, yeah, and I go into a little bit of the history too, because there's two other gentlemen besides Tesla that are the real, we've got Copernicus, Newton, and Einstein as the big three, right? It's the big three that need to get credit that got discredited is Augustin de Chardin Coulomb, Coulumb, which maybe Columbus is named after, I'm not sure. J.J. Thomson and Nikola Tesla. And Augustin de Chardin Coulomb, I think it was back in the 1600s, he discovered electromagnetism. He proved the electromagnetic field that we all exist in. He was able to show, I don't know if you know what a plasma dome is that you can order on Amazon or somewhere, but it shows the electromagnetic universe in a dome. It's that purple, kind of like thing you see the Tesla coil. That's what Tesla proved. So Coulomb proved there was electromagnetic energy. J.J. Thomson, who was an engineer, he proved that electromagnetism was self-perpetuating, that once you get the electromagnetism started, which is electric and magnets come together, that it had self-perpetuating energy. And then Tesla proved in the 1910s, 1920s, that electromagnetism was everywhere in the universe. I put a ground coil in the ground. I put an energy field above it. I connect the two. And he actually in Colorado caused lightning storms and power outages all around. He lived, I think it was near Boulder, and they kicked him out, shut him down, and he had to beg the utility company to turn his power back on. And that's when he moved back to Long Island, and J.P. Morgan financed his Weidencliff efforts. But they proved that was all electromagnetics in our field. And so the way the dome works is we're in an electromagnetic dome, electrofield above us, and we can get into it later if you want about how we tried to blast through the dome in the 60s in Operation Dominic and Operation Fishbowl. But the electromagnetism, as I understand it now, is done by the North Pole, is also ancient times was known as Mount Meru. That's the center of the negative charge. It has a negative toroidal field that comes up through it. And I don't know if you've seen the movie Thrive with Gamble, the guy from Procter & Gamble, but he shows how the toroidal field works in a world WHIRLD environment, where the energy charges go up and out, and then it connects to the Antarctic Circle, which is a positive charge or a cathode charge. So you've got the circle like a magnetic speaker. You've got the magnet in the middle, a negative charge, and around the perimeter is a positive charge. And then what makes the whole energy field work like a battery is the ocean's salt. The salient water of the ocean salt causes the electrolytes to charge. And so we have free energy anywhere to everybody at any time. All worlds would end. We'd have peace on earth finally. And we've had this technology for 100 years. And now they come up with a Tesla battery car like we're some advanced society. I mean, it's just, we have free energy. The dome works. And the other thing that's really interesting we found, which I've tried to contact some scientists and no one will engage me yet. My friend Bruce Hillier, who used to have the geodesic, geognostic website.com, but he had to shut it down. He discovered that he found scientific papers back from the early 1900s that showed these magnetic spherules were at 23.5 degrees below the Arctic pole. And we haven't found them down in the South Antarctic Circle yet, but I haven't found any papers on it. But 23.5 degrees is where the Tropic of Cancer stops. So if the sun is in a circle and the moon is in a circle above us being held by electromagnetic energy, and it's going in a concentric circle that's widening and enclosing, well, what are the limiters that stop at 23.5 degrees Cancer and 23.5 degrees Capricorn, where these circles of the moon and Earth get bigger and smaller and get greater energy and smaller energy? And so we found these scientists found these magnetic spherules in the water, in the oceans, that are 2 to 3 inches long and of intense magnetism. So we're thinking that's what forms the limiters of where the sun and the moon can go all the way to the Arctic, all the way to the Arctic, and then hit those limiters in the ocean and cause it to have energy, to create energy to go back towards the Tropic of Capricorn down south. And that's a very exciting find as well. So we're proving that we have free energy. We've proven we live in an electromagnetic dome. I mean, we've proven you can prove through basic trigonometry. We had two people stand 1,400 miles apart at noon, measure the angles of the sun where the sun was, measure the distance, and in basic trigonometry, we got 3,163 miles, and that the sun and the moon are above us. And anybody can do these experiments, and it's simple to do. And like you said, science, science, science. I mean, the Earth curvature, that's another simple one where miles times 8 inches. And so you can go out to the ocean yourself, sea level, and you can see for yourself about easily 10 miles from left to right if you're looking straight out the ocean, and about 3 miles out. Well, if it's 10 miles left to right, you would be able to see at least, get this, 66 feet of curvature. And you don't see that. If you're on a plane, you should be able to, you could see 50, 60 miles. You should see the curvature easily. So this whole argument that it's too big to see is absolute baloney. And to end the entire flat earth argument, Paul, all NASA has to do, here NASA, I'm challenging you, astrophysicists, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye, the Nye guy, show us a real picture of Earth. You're showing us photos from Mars and Jupiter, you know, so far away, and you can't show us a real shot from Moon 230,000 miles away. You can't put a satellite camera there and show us real Earth revolving. You know, there's no Google Earth pictures of the, and all there is Google Earth pictures of the Antarctic and the Arctic. Why? Why isn't there real pictures, photos of the Arctic and the Antarctic? So, I mean, the questions just keep going, you know?
That's why when you move to the flat Earth, the things that they're telling you seem totally absurd. And that's why people that have never made videos before are doing flat Earth experiments.
Right.
Now, NASA is another whole different topic. And we all know that it was started by Wernher von Braun, was one of the inspirations. But you talk about two other people. Let me see if I can see their names. Thomas, Keith, Glennon. And these people were hired by NASA, but they weren't rocket scientists. They were, get this, they were movie producers, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, you start with Wernher von Braun, and Wernher von Braun was a Wunderkind. He was the German Nazi V1, V2 buzz bomb creator. He was running the whole Nazi buzz bomb programs that were raising hellfire on Europe with our allies and with our GIs, and they're bombing the crap out of them during the war. And Operation Paperclip, the United States, along with the Vatican, under Vatican passport, they're called rat lines, took all these German scientists and eugenicists down to South America and brought them up over 25 years with full knowledge of the US naval intelligence, with full knowledge. I don't know if the president knew, but he was informed. He says, don't do it, but they did it. And they brought him into the United States. Well, Wernher von Braun was head of the original Saturn rocket program in 1958 when NASA was created. And so he ran all the way through the Apollo missions. And I don't know if you saw that little plaque I put on his tombstone. He put the plaque, and I forget the exact Bible quote, but it talked about the firmament. In the Bible quote he had, and that was the only thing he put on his tombstone, was talking about the firmament, trying to tell everybody that the whole NASA thing was a lie. So that's just one. Well, then you look at who was the first.
He was probably impressed because he ran Operation Fishbowl that tried to blow through it. Right. He was probably one of the people.
Right. And we can get into that in a minute. But starting from 1958, when NASA was created, John Glennon, Keith Glennon, his previous experience to starting as the first administrator of NASA in 1958 when it was created. Before that, he was executive movie producer for Paramount Studios, which later produced Star Trek. And before that, he was worked for the U.S. Navy in Connecticut for the United States Navy and the underground or underwater laboratories doing frogman testing and doing underwater testing. And that was the experience for starting NASA. And then after that, to run the Apollo missions, I don't think he was an administrator, but was Keith Kleineck, N-E-C-H-T is the end of his last name. And this guy went, after he did the Apollo missions, his reward was to be head of the Scottish Rite Freemason Grand Master in Washington, D.C., which tops off the pentagram symbol in Washington, D.C., where the Scottish Rite Freemason building is. He was put as the head of that. So it's all run by Freemasons, and the Freemasons are owned by the secret societies that eventually go up to the Vatican, which eventually go to the White Pope, and then go up above that to the Black Pope, and go above that to the 13 Illuminati bloodlines, which Fritz Springmeier gets into excellently in his book. So, we've had Paul for so long, and it's over now. The flat earth is ending 500 years, even more, of this entire charade of who we are, what we're about, what our cosmology is. And once you blow up NASA and see that the guys behind it were all frauds, and then you get into the whole fake footage of the moon and how, being in space in a vacuum. Well, how do things push off in a vacuum if there's no friction? How do rockets move around if there's nothing to push against? How could they be on the moon and they have the lunar module sitting there for 2-3 hours when the temperature outside is 200 degrees plus in the sun, and they're walking around somehow in 200 plus degrees in their thermal suits that are cooled by some operation that they've never disclosed about refrigerated cooling on such a hot moon? Well, I keep thinking about how hot did that lunar module be when they got back inside that tin can to take off again after being out for 2 hours? That thing must have been a freaking roaster oven, I mean, just stupid, simple thing like that. And then they've got pictures I put in the book of Apollo shots of the lunar module along with the command module sitting docked to each other, and you're going, who the heck took the picture?
You have a nice picture of the lunar lander, or the thing that they drove around.
Oh yeah, the lunar buggy.
Supposedly brought it there, and it's much bigger than the module. I want to go back to Glennon's experience. It's obvious why he was a producer, but his underwater video experience, well, why would that be important? Well, because they do all their spacewalks underwater, and of course, if you know how to do underwater photography, you're going to be a much better help to that whole thing. I always think, when I was a kid growing up, to be an astronaut was an important thing. And I remember getting out of high school, there were some people who were going into try to be astronauts. They were going to try to qualify for the program. I was just wondering, at one point in the programming, at what point in their education do they call them into the room and they sit down with them and they say, there is no outer space. It's all a bullshit tip. And we either want you to go along with this or we'll have to kill you. I wonder what part in the astronaut training program, how high, I guess you have to go up to about a 33rd degree in the Freemason before you can get this high. But I don't know, I always chuckle to myself going to sleep some nights thinking,
that's why, what's the secret? If there's 33 degrees, they got to keep letting them in on more secrets on each degree to show they're getting more power, right? So the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry, and before I read that, just, 33 degree Mason, Montclair Lodge, 144 New Jersey, Buzz Aldrin. Edgar Mitchell was the Order of DeMolay Mason at Artesia Lodge. James Irwin, Apollo 15. He was with the Tejon Lodge, 104 Freemasons in Colorado Springs. Don Eisel, Apollo 7, Luther B. Turner Lodge, 732. I mean, all these guys, Walter Sherrar, he was Sigma 7, Gemini 6, Mercury 3, 33 degree Freemason Carnival Lodge, 339 in Florida, Thomas Stafford, Alan Shepard, William Pogue, Vance Brand, Anthony England. I mean, all these guys were members of Freemasons. So that answers one of your questions. But do they all get information that it's a flat earth and they're never leaving the dome? And that's when they get to 33 degrees. Does it start sooner? The stuff I was just showing you on the back of the 5, the 10, the $20 bill, where they've got actually the whole flat earth scenario right there on the back of our currencies. Is that a 32 degree level they let them in on? Because we know they have the apron that shows who is that guy that wrote the book, the former CIA guy that showed the Freemason flag on the moon, that showed the Freemasons had been to the moon. That was my first kind of like, the Freemasons, they're running the whole moon story and they've got a flag on the moon. The Freemasons went to the moon. And then I realized, no, that's how they give the levels to the guys that say, hey, we're really cool. We went to the moon and we're the Freemasons. That's the entry levels. But then when you get to 33 degrees, you get told the whole story. and then you're their, excuse me for saying it, but then you're their bitches. Then you're going to do whatever they say, or they'll kill you, or they'll. These days, I think a lot of this is mind programming with the technology they have, that they can put thoughts or visions or put memories into people now, and they'll believe they've been to the moon. They'll believe they've been in the ISS space station. That technology is more than well advanced, as you know, in your TI research. So, I'm not sure where it goes from here, but a lot of people are living these lies. And I think I wonder about people that are in NASA that are reading about flat Earth and starting to question inside of NASA and inside of all these fake space agencies what they're thinking as they start to research flat Earth and compare it to what they've been told, if they can even begin to go there with that they've been lied to, and their job is just about CGI faking everything,
I think that's a real important point. I'm a psychologist, so my interest is in their beliefs and how you hold your beliefs, and your ego. Your ego holds on to these beliefs. That's why there are certain people. I mean, if your whole life involves around concepts of the space and the spinning globe and all that stuff, if you're an astronomer or anything like that, even a doctor or any student of biology, you have to buy the evolution story. I mean, you have to buy a lot of that stuff in order to succeed. So it just amazes me that people cannot. There's certain things that your ego holds on to, and they're going to hold on to the last minute. That's why a lot of people can't get into the flat Earth, because it just shatters too many paradigms, and they have to have this. I always call it a platform of beliefs that they can count on, and one of them is that Star Trek is real, or all those movies that we've been programmed with, and it's exciting because we can go to other planets and it's limitless. Little do they know that sitting here on the flat Earth, I've seen maps that show continents beyond Antarctica. I'm sure you've seen those maps too. There are other dimensional beings that are in here. We're kept from knowledge of any other human species, the giants, the Homo carpensis, the guys with the big heads that supposedly ran Egypt. There's all that to explore right here on Earth. We don't need to go into a fictitious interplanetary universe.
Well, yeah, and you get back, if we want to bring it back to astrology, which I've gotten deep into the past decade or so, and you look at astrological charts, and it's all based on a geocentric, the sun's solar return. Everything's based on astrology, and I haven't seen anybody. I want to do this when I get time, but I want to really delve into flat Earth and astrology, because if they're energy beings, and I think you've seen the luminaries, the pictures with people are taking the Nikon 900 cool pic camera, and they're zooming in on Venus, and they're zooming in on the other alleged planets, wandering stars, and they're seeing light energy beings. And someone brilliantly put together that it looks like these light energy beings of these beautiful colors are behind the dome in a watery realm, and that's why they're flickering like they do. And the guy put it to a babbling brook, and you could see the similarities between the water bubbling and these flickering of beautiful lights in the sky of these energy beings. And it dovetails perfectly with us being spiritual beings, and the hierarchy of the heavens is these light beings are here to assist us. And that's what ties beautifully into astrology, is there is a plan. There is a whole energies that like we're in Mercury retrograde now, and maybe that was why I was having trouble setting up this morning. It's just part of our DNA, and as above, so below. So again, it brings this whole connection of creation down to our souls, down to our living beings. But at the exact same time of this incredible revelation is blowing up everything you thought you knew about the world, everything you thought you knew about what you were taught. Everything is a lie. And so to take that depth and pull the rug out underneath your feet about what you knew, we're now entering a time of the airy time of the mind, which dovetails perfectly into the age of Aquarius from the age of Pisces, from the age of the Kali Yuga. into the age of the Dwapara Yuga of these huge cycles, and we're right on the cusp, we're right on the edge of, the Dalai Lama means ocean of wisdom, and we're looking at the ocean of wisdom. We're standing at the shore, and we're seeing this massive ocean we know is behind it. But the first thing we have to face, Paul, is these huge waves, and we're scared to death to go through these waves. But once you go through the waves, you're in the ocean of wisdom. You're seeing the whole picture. So it's really exciting times, and I work on how to present the right message in the right way, because as you know, if you don't put it out the right way, you get crucified on the internet, if you get one thing wrong. And so I use the internet of putting my stuff out, and then I see what the responses are, if my theories are correct, if my thesis is correct, or what I'm seeing is correct. And now I'm seeing so many others are doing the same thing, and it's just beautiful to see the growth of evolution of our minds and the collective beehive. And I think also that once we do this, we develop what Tesla called the Tesla shield, and that we become somewhat impenetrable ourselves to all the conspiracies of the Apollo, some of these things that we have to throw out, like maybe aliens. And if you look at the word belief and you look at the word alien means a lion, folks. A-L-I-E-N. They a lion to us. Belief, B-lie-F. We get an F grade if we B-lie. When we say hi to somebody, this is the kicker of them all. When we say hi to somebody, Paul, what do we say to them?
Hi.
Another word for, or what's the other word for hi?
Hello.
Why did you tell me to go to hell, Paul?
Yeah.
Hell,
Good.
Paul. Right? Heliocentric. Yeah. Hell, lie, centric.
Yeah. That's like
they got it everywhere.
Neil Armstrong. Neil A. That's if you take that backwards, which is how the Satanists would look at it. It's alien.
Right.
There might be a lion. Now I could go for days on astrology, because I wanted to do my doctoral dissertation on proving it, because I know you can. There are ways to prove it. There was the Gauquelin experiments back in the early 20th century that proved astrology by Mars placements. So there's scientific validity to it, but of course subsequent studies sponsored by the government had to throw it out. But and that's cool. And then you mentioned the Kali Yuga. If you look at the Yuga cycles, all the archaeological findings support the notion of the devolution of man from higher levels of consciousness in previous Yuga cycles. So we've gone from the Dwapara, now we're obviously in the Kali, which is the 75% darkness, 25% light. Now, how we get out of here without a mass extinction event, I don't know. But I know that the flat Earth is a key piece of releasing us from the Kali Yuga, I think, of releasing us from the Kali Yuga. And I've been thinking about it, and I'm going to probably do a podcast on this. Let me run it by you. I think it goes from secretivism to openness. I think that the secrets that they've been keeping us for keep us in almost a troglodyte type existence, where we have to drive a car that's it's an internal combustion engine. It was invented in 1850. We can't do better than that. Meanwhile, in 1860,
there's that year again, 1850, right?
Oh, in 1860, the U.S. government was shown levitation devices by a guy named Keeley. Right. It's all been kept from us. But now we're starting open source investigations, like the pedophilia. It's open source. You can add to it. And all this open source stuff is breaking us free. Now, I think we have bad times to come, but I think the flat Earth, open source, believing that we're in an energy environment that runs the sun and the moon and we're world. I think it's a cool time to be alive, even though it's scary as hell.
Well, and for whatever reason, we have chosen, and we've been chosen to bring this forth. And there's, people are accepting the call and waking up to these alternative realities, and they're being empowered to speak out, to do their own research, to discover. So whether we survive this event, I think we're in. The title of another book I have is on geoengineering and all the chemtrail spraying and what's going on in the skies is another just whole mind game, which I know you cover and a lot of people cover. But once we learn we're in a dome and that they've controlled the world above us, what I heard on a Flat Earth podcast, I forget by whom the other day, which I thought was brilliant, was they get us looking up and they get us looking out, but they haven't even charted the oceans. I don't know if you saw in the Flat Earth book where I showed how we've only examined like 5% of the ocean. And that's where they're doing all the work, is underwater, and they got all their dumb bunkers, the DUMBs for deep underwater, deep underground military bases. They've molded the entire United States and Europe, but they've also done that in the oceans as well. So I don't know if they're going to open up the dome, and this is another thing for the Bible scholars to get into, is was the flood caused by them opening up the dome simply and doing the biblical flood? That was also chronicled in many other religions previous. And that's a very interesting thought process when we look at what we're doing to Earth. We look at so many species dying. We look at here in California, we've had 5 years of the greatest drought in the history of California. And then this year we had the record most snow, most rain by any measure whatsoever, back to back. It's just absolutely amazing what's going on to our Earth. And destroying all the trees and just using the earth as a sewer and a supply house. I mean, we can't go on like this. So there has to be either a consciousness raising or a reset. And frankly, I'm okay with either one. But getting this information out now is raising our collective conscious to the point where I see a chance. I see a hope that enough people can wake up to understand that if we're in an enclosed environment, and all we're doing, excuse my French, is shitting in our home, we can't go on like this. Our children don't have a chance. And, we're $20 trillion in debt, current debt in this country, and stock markets are up, houses are up, but it's all based on debt. It's all going to come down. It's all based on falsehoods. I mean, now they're going to electronic currency. It's all based on perceived value. And so it can't continue. And so when we wake up to these bigger cycles, and what you brought up, getting back to the Kali Yuga stage, was, it's only 500 years ago they called it the Dark Ages. So in the big cycle of the Vedics have 311 trillion, 40 billion years is one cycle of a pralaya mantavara, breathing in, breathing out. We're just beginning to look up and see this vast story of a much greater creation, of a great historical perspective, of great amounts of time that the church has given us only back to, what we get back to 10,000 years, and then they call it prehistory, whatever that means, prehistory, right? And so we've been stuck in this enclosed box, and blowing up the heliocentric paradigm. I mean, it just opens your mind to all possibilities. Everything's possible. Nothing is true. That's another statement I'd say to myself. And so I live a life now of just investigation. And if we're only using at the best 12 to 15% of our brain power, whoa, this is just expanding into higher consciousness is all we're doing now. And so it becomes an inward personal journey as opposed to an outward, we got to change the world kind of thing. Is I tell people when they start talking about flat earth or this or that, and they always bring up the same thing. Well, nobody else is going to get it. And I always say to them right back, well, do you get it? Because it's so deep, we're just still uncovering the mysteries. So it's more of a personal inward journey before we can go outward. And I'm still on this personal journey, and I look at flat earth subject matter 4, 6, 8 hours a day. It's vast, it's wonderful, it's beautiful, it's scary, and it's exciting, all in the same breath.
Yeah, I think the HARP thing that you guys lived in California, matter of fact, I did videos on it. That was a HARP thing. And I'm sure your rain is, again, because they're trying to sell carbon credits. So right. Yeah, that's just amazing. But the flat Earth, I really do think that's the launch pad for for the real awakening. You know, it's like the 911, even more important than the 911. I wanted to, before we get into something else, which I do want you to do a little bit on the folding of the money. We've got some people working here, and the dogs bark at them. So when I talk, I'll turn my mic off when I'm not talking. When I'm talking, they're going to be going crazy. Anyway, I think a lot about space flight. You know, space flight, leaving the Earth. Now, the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour plus. Right here where we are, we're right off the equator. So we should be leaning this way because we're going so fast. And it's going around the sun at 66,600 miles an hour. And then that's going around, I think it's 500. You have them in your book, you have them laid out. When you're traveling somewhere, to me, in my small brain, you have to have where you're going from, where you're going to, and you have to have, well, here on Earth, we have north and south. I think in space, you'd only have left and right. You don't have up or down. To me, that maybe there are people that can figure out the complicated mathematics, because if you wanted to get back to Earth, Earth's not going to be where it was. It's going to be a long way away. And the thing that you're going for isn't going to be where it is. And if you look at it at an ephemeris, the planets move, but they change. They go retrograde, and then they'll shift a little bit, and it's not consistent. Saturn, if you're going to Saturn goes into retrogrades. It also doesn't take a consistent amount of time, because if you go through your Saturn cycles, your Saturn return is slightly different. So the whole thing of space travel, in addition to the fact that you can't propel yourself or turn left and right because there's no matter to push off of.
Right.
So have you gone deeper on this, or am I?
Oh no, I could go for days on this. I mean, another thing that nobody's picking up on the flat Earth, which I find really kind of like amazing, is I don't know if you can see this. Let's just talk. Let me see if I can get this in here. This is a round ball. Let's say this is Earth, right? Now, if this is Earth and you're at the equator, so you're down at Ecuador at the equator, 24,800 miles in circumference, something like that, around the belt of the equator on the round ball. And if you say on the round ball, there's 24 hours in a day. So let's divide the round ball up into 24 slices at the equator. So at the equator, at the bulge, at the belt line, 24 hours in a day, right? Now, Paul, I want you to tell me what time it is at the North Pole if you divide it 24 times.
I thought that was brilliant. I read that yesterday. There's no way to know.
So why doesn't anybody challenge that? All the 24-hour days are on a flat map. It's simple. Yeah. It's so stupid. It's simple that it cannot be on a round ball and have 24 hours in a day, because the North Pole and the South Pole. Now, if we take this round ball that's supposedly going at 1,000 miles plus per second, never feel a thing, spinning at 1,000 miles an hour on its axis at 23.5 degrees, sorry for my sarcasm, and then the solar system is going over 500,000 miles around the Milky Way, but the stars stay exactly the same above your head for centuries after centuries. So here's another question I had. So one of the biggest problems in flat Earth is that people are woefully uneducated just about basic heliocentrism. They don't know we spin at 1,000 miles an hour. They don't know it's 24,000 miles around. They don't know that the sun is 93 million miles away, and that we travel 93 million miles away, 533 million miles in 1 year to get back to our birthdays. That means we're traveling at 1,000 miles a second. So I said, okay, so we're in elliptical orbits. You're referring to Saturn retrogrades and Mercury retrogrades, and that's the whole Tycho Brahe got into why they were in elliptical orbits and how the retrograde works and all that. Are they going backwards, or is that just an optical perspective illusion? But I looked into that. If we're 93 million miles away and we're in elliptical orbit, that means that we're closer to the sun at some points on our travel, 533 million miles in 1 year, and we're farther away. And it works out that during the winter months in the northern hemisphere, they say, and in the southern hemisphere on the tilt, it's actually closer to the sun at 91 million miles away, and then we're at 95 million miles away during the North American summer. Does that make sense? So in elliptical orbit, we're closer to the sun during the South American summer. South America's having summer. The bottom half of the Earth on a round ball is closer to the sun, right?
And it's the coldest spot on Earth.
The Antarctic is the closest spot on Earth, 10,000 feet of snow, and it's closest to the sun for 6 months and closer than when it's in the North American time. How can you have 10,000 feet of snow and the Arctic is melting where now it's almost ice-free? It doesn't work, because then for 6 months, the Arctic is going to be closest to the sun, right? Mm-hmm. And that would be getting the same amount of sun. It's getting the same, but actually, in actuality, the Antarctic is closer to the sun during its 6 months by 2 million miles. It would heat up even more. And it's got 10,000 feet of snow, according to Byrd and everybody else. I mean, the lies are just ridiculous. So that's just another way to show how this whole story doesn't make any sense. And that, you know, just we're traveling at 1,000 miles a second, which nobody can relate to. And the stars stay the same above us, and the stars circle like they do. So, you know, we are geocentric. And I just see the story coming out where they're going to say, well, the Earth is a sphere, but we're actually going around. The sun is actually going around with us. The scientists made a mistake. And they're going to get us arguing whether it's a flat or a sphere. That I think is going to be the next argument they're going to meme into us. I don't know.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
It'll be interesting to see what they do. While I was reading through your book, I realized how close Cape Canaveral is to Disneyland, and how much of a mind control game the Disney is and NASA is. They're both in the same game. They're both doing that. And I remember watching, if I watched one launched, I must have watched 25. And they always go up, and of course they go over the ocean. And now I know they go over the ocean is so they can retrieve the capsule and, I guess, put it back in or do some filmmaking with it or whatever. But also not, I might be off on this, and you can correct me, but the Earth, I think, is spinning the other way. So if you shot something up with the spin of the Earth, it would go toward the Gulf of Mexico, it seems to me. I don't know, maybe I'm off, but I kept watching it go over that way, and I'm thinking, we're spinning the other way. But anyway.
We're spinning west to south, and they launch it up, and it's going east to west. So it's counter trend to the Earth spin, and then they would say, oh, we're doing the whip so we could get into outer space. They got their whole storyline. I mean, it's incredible that the shuttle hasn't changed design in 20 years. It's still this big, huge, massive machine going up allegedly into space and stuff, but they got the huge thrusters in the back, you know, which you can hear the sound of landing. They're actually landing the plane. You know, it's not gliding in this 300,000 ton, no, 30,000 ton machine that can't, you know, what kind of machine can fly like that, first of all, and glide with those little tiny wings? You know, it's just so stupid, the whole story. And then your story about them ditching the Morton Thiokol and the Lockheed Saturn engines into the Gulf of Mexico. Well, that's exactly where they put the Bermuda Triangle. You know, the Bermuda Triangle is basically don't go around here and that's where they dumped all their freaking engines. They don't want anybody on their ships running into them. So they create the whole Bermuda Triangle story so nobody goes there because it's all GPS. You lose your connections because they control GPS. I mean, it's just the story. Their story, they're just brilliant. I mean, you got to honor and admire how good they are, you know, and how long they've been good at deceiving us all.
It's like you're being, I always look at that when I look at movies, old movies, like Mel Brooks movies, you know, how he gradually, humorously loosened our morals and loosened up. And I mean, we're being screwed, but we're being screwed by the experts. You know, it's almost an honor. I'm not saying it is an honor, but it's, yeah, they're really good at what they do.
No, I think it is an honor. I want to honor. I want to write some biographies on gentlemen and ladies like Lady Blount and the Rothbottom, Samuel Rothbottom, who wrote the Cosmology, and these gentlemen and ladies in the 1850s who came out when the first story of heliocentrism came out. I mean, this is why they never changed the words, I believe, sunrise and sunset, because they couldn't fool the farmers and everybody living outside that were looking at the sun moving across the sky, folks. The sun is moving across the sky. You really see it. And so they had to keep the words sunrise and sunset. Why haven't any grammar queens and astrophysicists called it what it should be called in heliocentrism? What would it be called in heliocentrism? A sunrise and sunset, if we're being accurate, Paul. What would it be called?
Well, it wouldn't have anything to do with it. It would have to do with our twisting. A retwist, right. Or I don't know. I'm not a linguist.
Earthrise, earth set. Does that sound kind of funky? Earthrise, earth set?
It would be more like that because it has to do with the earth.
It'd be earth turning towards the sun or earth turning away from the sun would be the accurate description if we're speaking heliocentrism, right?
Yeah, like the morning earth turn. They'll probably pick this up and use it.
But why didn't they change the language back then? And I think it was because they couldn't fool everybody that was working and living outside and tell them that the sun wasn't moving. But once we got indoors behind our glass classrooms, behind our glass cars, behind our glass homes, going to our glass works and using light pollution in all the cities and all the suburbs, we lost our story. We lost our story of the heavens. We lost the mythology. You know, this is where astrotheology is so beautiful. Easter is based on the Eastern Star. It's the first day of full moon after spring, the first Sunday. The whole story of the Son of God rising on December 25th, that's the pagan story of the sun going down on the fall equinox, in the autumn equinox, when it would hang on the Southern Cross for 3 months until December 22nd, when the sun would rise or die on the cross on December 22nd for 3 days on the southern constellation in the southern hemisphere, if that existed, and the constellation, and then would rise off the cross on December 25th until the resurrection, when food would be grown again. Where the pagan story was the sun, S-U-N of God, rose on December 25th because they're watching the sun, and then on April 1st was the day of the new year in the pagan old Zoroastrian sun systems, and so the April 1st was the day of the first new year, and the church got a hold of it, changed it from the Gregorian calendar, and what was the other calendar? They changed the calendar to our current Gregorian calendar. I'll think of the name in a minute. And they basically said, you know, the sun is you know, all important now, and we make a Sunday for our churches and whatnot. And we've changed the whole story about. And the April 1st day was actually the first day with food was going to be grown again, and it was their new year, and now they call it April Fool's Day. That's why all the churches built all their sites over the sacred sites that the pagans had. They just co-opted all the good stuff, switched it around to their thing, what they wanted to use, and then made the good stuff like Nazi swastika. The Nazi swastika comes from, I don't know if I put that in the book in the new edition I did, but if you look at the Big Dipper, the Big Dipper rotates around the Northern Star, right, at night? Well, that's how the ancients determined their seasons. They watched the Big Dipper rotate around, and when the bucket was this way, it was spring. When the bucket was up here, it was fall. I mean, it was all based on it, and they made the swastika as a positive energy following the circumnavigation up above us in a clockwise motion of the Big Dipper. Well, Hitler and all their, guys behind Hitler, Himmler was a black pope, and Stalin had his Jesuit handlers. This has all been theater for us, all these world wars. Well, they took the swastika and they inverted it or switched it. So now it became a negative energy, which Hitler used going from right to left instead of left to right. I mean, it's all based on the Big Dipper, the whole swastika. In Tibet, they have them all over the place. It's a powerful, positive energy symbol that they co-opted and made into negative energy. So getting back to 500 years of this Dark Ages, we're just learning all this stuff. We're just emptying the gutters and pouring down the sewer, all this trash that has been thrown into us. And it's just vast. It's just vast, Paul, really. It's huge.
Yeah, I feel. Yeah, I feel. I really wish that everyone wished that we're getting a feedback. Open their minds to just explore this. I've never known anybody that's really seriously looked into the flat Earth that isn't a flat earther. So I encourage you to look into it. Don't believe us. I mean, we've been into it. We've been into it so long that we can't. It's difficult. It's a real stretch for us to go back to the ball model. And if there's ever a dispute between the flat and the ball, Occam's razor would go with the flat because it's the logical thing. It's the thing we can see and it's easily provable. The stretch is the ball and the evolution from the monkeys and all that stuff. So if ever I'm challenged, I always say, well, okay, show me some, you're the one that's got the outlandish claim. Prove your outlandish claim. I can take you a walk and prove that it's stationary and flat. Anyway.
So how is that conversation? I think it's important for flat Earth activists because once you get this information, it's incumbent, I feel, that you need to speak out. You need to take the bullets, take all the crap that gets thrown at you, like you said with the Gandhi quote. First they ignore you, then they ridicule you, and I completely agree we're in the ridicule stage. Gandhi's next thing after they ridicule you is then you fight, then you win. So I think we're going to head into this fight. But when you go into the fight with this love and open heart to try and show people this theocosmology about our spirit, about our greater being, about a much more exciting story of us, have you approached anybody, or how do you start to talk to them? Do you have a filtering system, or I use the shotgun approach? I just start talking. But some people, I heard one guy on Sage of Quay, he says he asks people if they think we've been to the moon, and if they say no, then he tries to introduce flat Earth. So I'm wondering, Paul, how do you speak to people?
Well, let me get I'm on. Okay. Actually, I generally let them do whatever they're doing. And when I find somebody, like I have somebody now I was telling you about, she is brilliant. She's has an open mind. She's a ball earther. I think what I'd like to do is just hint around at it. And then I think I'd like to get her your book. And she'll read it. She'll go through it. And then we can talk through it. But I think of all the people that I've talked to and presented this to, I think we've had like 2 or 3 that have actually gone back and researched it. Usually it's, Paul, you're crazy. We can't go there. And I hope that more people, people like, well, I was happy to see Sophia's Small Storm.
Absolutely.
And come out. I'd like to see people like James Corbett and some of these other, Luke Rudkowski. I'm sure he doesn't have time to take the time to do the research. But unless you take the time to do the research and you're based in that cosmology, everything you say is a little bit off. Everything you say, if you're talking to an awake flat earther, it's a little bit off, and they've got to go through a translation. Well, he believes he's on a ball spinning through endless space. So, yeah, I usually don't push it, but I usually listen for someone who is open. This person has accepted another cosmology, and more of a Native American cosmology, and I think flat Earth fits easily into it. So I'm going to pursue that, but I'm very. I'm not like you. I don't just push it. I just kind of hint around. I think I should probably be more upfront, and people who know me know I'm a flat earther. So that's how I do it.
But what I find interesting though too is like when you present it to them, you're immediately dismissed without any type of conversation. And I've got my blogs out for 5-6 years, and I've got I've got over 2.5 million views on my YouTube and a couple million on my blogs and stuff. Not to toot my horn, but it's just like I got credibility now, and my family and friends, we can bring it to the cyberspace all you want, but until you bring it home and look people in the eye and bring up the term flat Earth and see the look on their face and hear them whisper to other people about you, and it gets to be a real interesting life when you bring this up to others and your credibility of all your other work is immediately dismissed. And then you start talking to people and find out they have no concept about general cosmology. They have no training. And then when I find a pilot, and this is, I get into the book and I start talking about how do you guys adjust for the curve in the plane? And I know the language. I can nail any pilot I can nail to the wall. Any astrophysicist I can nail to the wall, but they refuse to engage you. They use ad hominem attacks, which is attacking your person rather than deal on the subject. They change to the subject they want to talk to. It's very interesting to understand the dynamics of debate and how they change the subject and will not engage in simple conversation when they have to start thinking that they don't know very much, that they don't even know why here's another question. What makes the Earth spin at 1,000 miles per hour?
That's a perfect question. And why is
anybody?
Why is it consistent?
Yeah. Why does it spin exactly that you can do a Greenwich time where they can time you down to the nanosecond 500 years in the future, so it's spinning on its perfect axis at 1,000 miles an hour. It's been spinning that way perfectly. They can go back in time and predict it's a perfectly spinning ball at 1,000. What makes it spin?
Yeah, no drag, nothing. Just spins.
Well, that's what it's called axial momentum. And what the story is, well, first of all, before we get into that, I mean, how do they know the core is made of iron, molten, sun-like energy when we've only drilled down 8 miles?
Yeah.
I mean, how do they know it's made of iron, molten coal? Well, the story is that this axial momentum, axial movement story is when the Big Bang theory occurred 14.5 billion years ago and came from nothing, exploded from nothing into everything and created everything and blasted out at the speed of light of 186,000 miles a second or 32 trillion miles a year. And we continue to expand. And then 4.5 billion years ago, the sun was created and then it kicked us out of it. And we kicked out the moon and everything started orbiting perfectly. And then it went into this 1,000-mile spin without drag, without friction, 4.5 billion years ago, and it's never been off a second since.
Yeah.
What makes it spin? Well, it just started spinning because it spun off. I mean, that's as deep as they go with this shit. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's really a wild ride when you try to talk to them. But your book is a place. I think it's a great book for people that are flat earthers because you can remember and have a reference for all these little factoids and these little questions. But I think it's a great reference for people who aren't into the flat earth yet and can be awakened. The people that aren't into the flat earth are going to be so incredibly deceived coming up here. I mean, I hate to think about it because this is it's the basis for energy slavery. It's the basis for your insignificance as just a monkey who can build Toyotas. I mean, it's the basis for their whole lie. But if you can accept the explosion of the lie and get the lie out of there, just like Jamie was saying, oh, there's a whole different science out there, and your mind goes and explores this way and explores that way, and it just. I'm sure that if we had, as we get a, how can I say, a critical mass of scientific people, engineers that are into the flat earth, we're going to be finding real science answers to these things and real energy sources. And it's going to be a real joke to sit back and watch all their deceptions that are based on the spinning ball not work for us. Do you want to go into the new stuff that you're finding on the bills? That might
Sure.
be interesting.
Well, let me just read one more thing just to back up, because one of the things I found really spiritually uplifting is the validation from people who I respect and have had a lot of respect in the past modern historical century. I don't know if you heard of Rudolf Steiner, founded the Waldorf schools and biodynamic farming, but his mentor was a guy named Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. He was a German poet and philosopher in the 1750s to 1830s. And he was a mentor to Steiner. And he wrote back in this time period, quote, "It may be boldly asked, where can the man be found possessing the extraordinary gifts of Newton, who could suffer himself to be deluded by such hocus pocus, if he had not in the first instance willfully deceived himself? Only those who know the strength of self-deception and the extent to which sometimes trenches on dishonesty are in a condition to explain the conduct of Newton and of Newton's school. To support his unnatural theory, Newton heaps fiction upon fiction, seeking to dazzle where he cannot convince. In whatever way or manner may have occurred this business, I must still say that I curse this modern theory of cosmogony and hope that perchance there may appear in due time some young scientist of genius who will pick up courage enough to upset this universally disseminated delirium of lunatics. Someday, someone will write a pathology of experimental physics and bring to light all those swindles which subvert our reason, beguile our judgment, and what is worse, stand in the way of practical progress. The phenomenon must be freed once and for all from their grim torture chamber of empiricism, mechanicism, and dogmatism. They must be brought before the jury of man's common sense." End quote. Isn't that good?
That's really great. And then there was, what's the one by Tesla? I know it's in your book. It's about when we start seeing beyond the physical universe, man will make more progress in 10 years scientifically than it has in all past years. Am I close?
Yeah, that's a good paraphrase. Yeah, I don't have it up here, but he's basically saying we've got to start opening our minds to open up the whole picture of reality. Because once you understand electromagnetism, we're magnetic beings, our heart, I mean, we resonate almost exactly the same with Earth's frequency. Earth's frequency and our frequencies are just a few megahertz apart, 8.47, 8.54. And also the ionosphere, which we live in, is also within that frequency. And so a sidebar, which is really interesting, is the Tavistock Institute. I don't know if you've gotten into this with the Beatles, but the Tavistock Institute wrote all the Beatles songs, Paul and McCartney, Lennon songs and whatnot. And when they came out with Converse shoes and Keds back in I don't know if you remember, in the 1960s, Converse shoes and Keds started coming out. And the Beatles actually came out with an album right at the same time all these rubber shoes were being introduced into our society. And what they did by introducing rubber shoes is they disconnected us from Earth's energy. And I don't know if you've heard about people grounding now, walking around barefoot, doing sun gazing, taking, not eating, breatharians, not eating anymore. By putting us under rubber shoes, they disconnected us from our battery, from the heavens above connecting with the earth below to charge our energy fields. And by putting rubber on our feet, and you're very hard pressed to find leather shoes anymore, we've disconnected our soul consciousness by design. Well, do you know what the Beatles album they came out to celebrate their scheme? Do you know what the name of the album was?
Rubber Soul.
Got it. That's how good these guys are. So I walked around barefoot and I just found more earth connectivity. I just found a grounding. And, you know, Sophia gets into the sepsis stuff about, you know, how we're up a second, third floors. We're disconnected from earth grounding. And she's come out with these grounding devices and they're amazing. I mean, it's a reconnection to our source is what's happening here, Paul. And it's super exciting. So I just wanted to add that little bit.
Yeah, the great guys. We were talking about people we like to study that were really effective deceivers if you can say, they did it so well. Theodore Adorno, who started off at the Frankfurt School, ended up, I think, at Tavistock. He
Right.
he created the Beatles, and he was well into the Aquarian conspiracy, which was our whole hippie movement. I'm sure you lived through that. I lived through it, and but it was so well done. We thought it was organic, and the Beatles were the very talented little English guys who could write this stuff. Well, they didn't write it. Theodore and his group of mind control experts did. And if you go through, which we've been doing actually over the last couple of years, analyzing the different words, knowing that it's pointing toward the global enslavement, you can see how they're putting little pieces in here. It's amazing.
And they use the frequency. Tesla's frequency, energy, and vibration. That's all we are, is frequency, energy, vibration. And that's all I think about now in terms of, like colored light is frequency, right? When you get down to it, it's a different vibrational frequency. So what we see our brain takes in, and we have to match it with an image. And that's why I think they're coming out with this flat earth meme stuff. And by putting it in the back of our minds, this flat earth, like I'm talking to people now, and I'm showing them my book, and I say, have you ever heard of flat earth? And I can see them go, oh yeah, I just think I heard about it recently, but I can't remember where. And so this is the way they put this trap into the back of our minds. And this might be a good segue into getting into the currency of our currency and why everything's based on water and how the dollar bills all relate. And if I could read, let me just find this one thing real quick here. Admiralty law. We're based on Roman Latin law. We use a Roman Latin dictionary, Black's dictionary, to understand why we're in our legal system. And it applies to our currency and our water and our money. And by having us out at sea, we're never on land. So we're never human beings. We're personified as citizens, second-class citizens to boot. And that our banking system, that's why we have our currency, we have our deposit slips, we have our liquid assets, frozen assets, cash flow, liquid assets. It's all based on water, but it's also based on our court system, where you go into the bailiff and you go into the docket and you go on your citizenship, your partnership, your leadership. It's all based on us being in water, and we'll come down the birthing certificate, the water breaks, and they put your foot on the document, that, the land document. Your mother's the one that signs the name on the document, not your father when you're born. It's all based on this whole system of us being out to sea. And so they use our language to deceive us. And they also use the currencies. And this all gets into the black occult, the dark magic. And I don't know if I can do this or not, but let me try. And let me know if you can see this. Let me see how I can get that over there. Can you see that?
Yeah, we can see it. I want to mention that all these things about the naval, the maritime law is in your book.
Okay, and then here's the currencies. And if anybody's ever seen the whole 9/11 event on the back of the dollar bill, the 5 is the construction over here on the left, the towers being built. I don't know if you can see that well or not. The 10 is the North Tower being hit. The 20 is the South Tower being hit. And then on the 50, you see the smoke. And then on the next 50, the empty sky where the towers were. And then the 100, they've got the water fountain. And you see their little planes. It's 90 degrees and 135 degrees, all sacred geometry numbers. The 2 planes that hit the buildings are right there, United and America, right? So we see the whole story of 9/11 was done on the currencies. And people are just waking up. And by what I just did, when people see that, as I'm breaking a spell, because the spell has been cast into us. And by carrying around their currency, we're actually agreeing to their deeds. We're actually agreeing to their work by using their currencies. We're participating. Subconsciously, we know. Consciously, we're not aware. But when you bring it to the conscious, it brings up it breaks this, what they call a sigil or spell. And so you can't hold that power that once you break that spell. That's why in school they have spells. Whole schooling, every hour the bell rings. That's Pavlov's dog ringing the bell, so you don't remember that. If you're in power, and I worked on Wall Street for 25 years, they spend a copious amount of time making sure the people below do not take their power away. They protect their power, so they deceive and deception with language and whatnot. So the currencies I started playing with yesterday, and I started bringing out my currencies, and I started making airplanes, but I started folding them the other way. And so here, if you can see, here is the $5 bill with Tower 1 on it, and then I flip it around, and if you turn it over this way, you can see that there's a painting, and it looks like there's a painting going on here, and there's a 5 in purple, which is kind of like a sun in purple. In purple, you're starting to see the theme, purple come in, purple's royalty. You saw Donald Trump wear purple ties. You saw when they went to inauguration of Trump, the Clintons were wearing purple. So there's this purple theme being introduced. And then at the bottom, you have In God We Trust of the White House, and it's being pointed down like it's being destroyed, and there's a new painting coming above that. And I said, wow, that's interesting. And then I got another version of a $5 bill, and here's a plane. And I don't know what you can make of this, Paul, but it looks like there's some type of machine down below here, and there's that painting again, bridged by like 2 cypress trees or something like that. So that's on the 5. So then I go to the 10, and here's the tower being brought down on the 10. And then at the bottom, this is very interesting, that at the bottom, when you flip it over, that's the US Treasury upside down. And they're pointing down like it's being destroyed. Well, we're $20 trillion in current debt and hundreds of $1 trillion in obligated debt. They have to destroy the currency. Now you flip this thing over on the 10, what do you see? Well, that looks like what they say, you know, if you fold it the wrong way, you get the Twin Towers. No, you turn it this way, what do you get? You see what that is? That's the Pentagon. That's the hole in the Pentagon where the plane flew in, right? So you get all these different ones. And again, here's 9/11 on the backside, and is Tower 2. Okay. Now you go up to the 20s, and the 20s have World Trade Center 2 coming down on this side. And then you flip the 20 over. Let me see what this one is. And this has a different shape and form on here. I'm not quite sure what to make of this, but it does look like something inside is cracking down through the top, right? And then on the bottom here, we have In God We Trust again, with the Independence Hall, pointing down. Now we take a newer 20, I think this is the newer one, and we flip that over, and then you got the Pentagon again with the missile hitting the side. And then we go to the 50s, and here's the smoke on the 50s, and you see the dome. This is the Washington Square. Actually, Giuliani spent like $22 million. This lady did a really good video of when they changed the currencies. But the archway is in Washington Fountain in New York City that framed the World Trade Centers perfectly. And they moved the fountain over like 20 feet, so it framed it before the 9/11 events. So here it is on the $50 bill of the towers going down in smoke. Well, you flip it over, and at the top, you see there's that machine again. It's like it's a camshaft or some type of machine that's churning stuff up, like it's a big rotor or something. And then again, you see pointing down, In God We Trust. And what I found really interesting on these bills, on the other ones too, is you see how there's an angle, how it's like at an angle. Well, look at the currency next to it. It's flat. So they actually put an angle, and I can't figure out if you fold it evenly how they get the angle in there. But there's an angle to the shape as well. So there's something going on with that. So there's the 50 of the tower going down in smoke. And then here's the 50 of it all being gone. No more plane, United American on both sides. And then you have that kind of machine or whatever that thing is churning up with, looks like water or shrubbery or something on the sides, right? So now we've gone through the 50s, and now let's go to the 100s. So the 100 you saw had the water fountain, right? What they called a water fountain. Now I got another take on this. So here on the other 100, on this 100, if I compare them next to it, you've got this other one. Now this 100 has like that machine churning, but it's like, looks like it's churned more. And notice that the archway at the top here, it's kind of bowed, where the archway was peaked at the other one, right? So does that look like a crack? Does that look like a crack in the egg? Does that look like the egg is cracking? Could that be they're opening up the dome and they're letting the water in? See how the dome's cracking right there on the 100?
Yeah,
is that possible?
I think it's been done before. They came in through the rift.
It could be.
Great fun.
Yeah, and so then we go to the $100 bill, and here's the $100 bill. This now it's in gold. Now notice that when I showed you earlier the $100 bill with the Declaration of Independence and the gold inkwell. Well, here the numbers are in gold, okay, and here's the front of it. And doesn't that look like water coming down through the buildings?
Yeah.
And doesn't that look like a drill at the bottom, like it's drilling?
Yeah, it's strange.
So are the floods going to come? Now look at the 1. Look at the 1 and 0. And look at over here. Does it look like something spewing up and into there, like it's going to come like a big fire? Like something's coming down from below and shooting up. They drilled into something and they tapped into it, and water's coming up from below as well. So not just above, but below. I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there to you.
I think
it's crazy.
This is new currency. These are changes that they made in a fiat currency that's about to collapse and be replaced by digital. Why would they spend all this money changing their talisman, which is what I think these are?
Well, it might be, there's a lot of reasons for it, getting us into the transhumanist stage, and we can go into that all day. But when you see that turned over, and I don't have one fully folded, but I can show you. If I turn this one over on the back side here, and you open this up, it's an owl. It's a one-eyed owl. Just like on the back of, remember on the back of the dollar bill in that little corner, they got the owl. We compared it to Bohemian Grove. And then on the bottom here, we have Independence Hall upside down. So there's an owl on this one, and this one has a different shape. So there's direct intention. Now these bills were issued, they were ready to go in 2009. They were ready to print, but they did not issue them until October of 2013. These guys have a schedule. They have many options. They can do voice of God. They can do, the whole, what you're referring to, either, putting Jesus in the sky and making us all believe in voices in our head. But it's very, very interesting that they may be talking about opening the dome. Now here's opening the dome, and here's the water, and here's the dome closed, and here's the water coming through, and here's the opening of the dome right here. And then on the new one, they show the floods coming through. And at the very end, on the very last one of the $100 bill, they have this. Now, does that look like a flag? Now, notice also the yellow spots. They got this yellow spot theme, but it's not a gushing spot like it was over there. It's a round yellow spot that gives a one eye, and there is some type of flag on top of some type of cauldron or something like that. And also, what's really interesting about this, if you look at the name right here, these words, like I said before, it had United American. This says the Rica. And Spanish, that means the rich, right?
Right.
And all the other ones, it has the Uni America. And here's another one, the Rica. You see the words right here, the Rica, the rich. They're telling us who they are and what they're doing. And then the last one I'll show you is I made a little plane here, and here's the tower, one coming down, and these are wings, and I turn this over, and look what happens. You've had In God We Trust, and In God We Trust going down, and there's that painting again in the middle. It's like they're creating their new world. They're creating the new vision of what they want to see. And this is just folding bills. And that's how much intention, I believe, they tell to the story for those of us with eyes to see and ears to hear. They have to disclose what they're doing, and it's like we're uncovering these secret codes. It's super exciting. And I don't know anybody that's ever looked at that. And then the coup de grace in it all, the best for last, is I was showing you earlier, is on the back of the $5 bill. What do you now see, Paul?
Well, you can see the dome.
Right. Can everybody see the dome? See the dome, how it's etched there? It comes in, it's etched and around. Notice the flat base right here, the flat earth. It's right here, and here's the dome going over that. I don't know anyone else that's come to that. I just discovered that yesterday, and I went, holy cow, I hadn't heard anybody talking about that. The $10 bill has the same. I don't have one of those, but you look at the $20 bill. Now notice the dome is now round and more oblate, but it's still a dome, right?
Right.
Now let's take the 50. Now you see the chemtrail clouds? Now you see it's still anchored down. The bushes are coming up.
and it's kind of like a round, but now they arch the sides there. It's not just elliptical or oblate. There's now putting arches on that. And then everybody's going, what about the 100? And then here's the 100. This is the new 100. And you can see now the whole thing from here goes across the whole page now. And notice something really interesting. I don't know if I can put these up next to each other, but notice how it's now underwater at the bottom here. You can see the Independence Hall is like, it's underwater. And it's not connected like it was here to the base. See how it's attached to the base with the bushes and shrubbery and the building? Now it's not attached to the base anymore.
Wow. Wow.
Are they flooding us? Is that the thing? Is they're going to flood us out of here and go underneath their bunkers? And I don't know. But it's just a great mind game. And then here, here's another one where it's connected to the base, but it looks like it's underwater. So one's connected, one's not connected, and one's connected here. So is there intention behind all their designs? Absolutely. Is images more powerful than words? And images more powerful and symbols more powerful? Absolutely. So they're telling us the earth is flat. They're telling us we live in a dome. They're telling us that we are, energy beings that are more powerful than they're so scared of us. They've had to create this powerful narrative of deception because they're afraid of our powers, Paul. That's what I've gotten out of all this.
I think you're right on target. I think we're as long as they keep us thinking that we're insects on a flying ball, we don't seem powerful. When we start getting our power back and we start seeing things, and if they do something, don't take it for granted. I mean, I said that thing about Neil Armstrong, if you run it backwards, it's alien. They do stuff like that all the time. And if you're watching for that, you can see their signatures and their handprint. And it's an amazing time to be around, because I think something's going to happen that's going to turn this thing around. It might be the second coming. It might be it's some kind of a switch from the Kali Yuga back up into the Dwapara Yuga. I think there's a lot of people that are not going to be able to open their minds and be able to embrace the change in consciousness that's happening. So there could be a bifurcation or a splitting off of consciousness. That's what I see more and more. But something's going to change, and it's really great to be awake during this change. And I think one of the signs that people are really awake is that they can see the flat earth.
Absolutely. And one of the things you brought up, about names, about Neil Armstrong and whatnot, I mean, this is the whole thing. Once you understand how long we've been programmed, I mean, that's why they call it TV programming. And if you think about, everybody gets their information either from school or either through social devices, from a screen. For the past, at least a generation, 2 generations now, we've all gotten from the same sources that own this. All the companies own the same. So they bring in this guy and he snows us in. His name's Eric Snowden, right? And the guy takes off with all the money. His name's Bernie, and he made off with all the money, right? Then they bring this guy in Congress who's got his unit and all these other people, and his name's Anthony Weiner, right? I mean, this stuff just goes on. So now who do we got?
Taking all the money, Goldman Sachs. I mean,
yeah, but Bernie made off with all the money, right? Bernie made off with all the money. And then we got this guy Trump. And what is Trump? In bridge, Trump is the last card you play in bridge. Trump in biblical times was the trumpet clarions is the call. I forget the biblical passage exactly, but that was calling the end times when the horror of the beast came in and rode the beast, just like in Genesis 17:4. It's all prophetical because they're causing it to happen based on their prophecy. And I don't know if you've gotten into where I wrote in the book about the creation of Washington, D.C., and also the City of London, and also the Vatican, the 3 trilaterals that run the world. The Vatican runs the religion, the City of London runs the banking, and Washington, D.C. is the military arm. I've asked people, and I've offered $100 for 2 years. Finance guys, smart guys, people, everybody. And no, I've never given up a $100 bill yet. Why was it named Washington, D.C.? Or what year was Washington, D.C. founded? I mean, this is where the president, the Congress, the Supreme Court live. Everybody goes and votes for these guys. What date was Washington District of Columbia founded? What does district mean of Columbia? What was the name of Washington, D.C. in Maryland before it was Washington, D.C.? 4 questions, $100. No one's taken it yet. No one in 2 years have asked this question over probably 1,000 times. We don't know anything about the founding of Washington, D.C. Well, the fact is, it was named Rome, Maryland, before it was Washington, D.C. The Potomac was called the Tiber River. There's 77 hills that were the same 7 hills names as in Rome, Italy. John Carroll, the Jesuit who founded Georgetown University 6 months before, donated land for Washington, D.C. He founded Georgetown Jesuit School, where Bill Clinton went to, where Donald Trump going. He went to Fordham Jesuit School. Who was Obama's intelligence services? All Jesuits. Who was the generals? And all went to the Emerson Foreign Service School at Georgetown. I mean, it goes back and back in history. And so you see this pattern of religion. Who's the right hand? It's always, the left hand they show you, but it's the right hand doing the work. Well, who's the right hand of Obama? Joseph Biden, Roman Catholic. Who's the right hand of Trump? It's the guy named Pence, Roman Catholic. Himmler, he was the right hand of Hitler. I mean, this stuff goes down throughout history, and we've seen this controlling arm that's been staying in the shadows, and that's why they call him the Black Pope, because he stays in the shadows. They operate in the darkness. And these are evil people. I mean, this is satanic, and this is why they use the word Santa Claus. It's Satan. That's why NASA, with the tongue fork going through, is Satan with the T in there. I mean, it's amazing how it permeates this whole evil, like you said, devolution. But it's coming to an end now. We're shining our Bics into the darkness and finding great cavities of darkness, and they can't hide from us anymore. And you're helping get the word out, and it's just part of this great awakening. It's exciting.
So are you, Jamie Lee, and you've written a great book. I hope a lot of people buy it, and it's a great coffee table book. I'll say, if you wanted to wake people up, if you have a coffee table, which I don't think we do, that would be a great thing to have on there, because it certainly would. I would alienate a few, but you've got to win a few, lose a few. Well, we're running into maybe the third hour now. Can't remember exactly when we started, but I could do this all day. I'm having a lot of fun, and I'm sure you are too. Do you have any final words before we sign off and bid the audience adieu?
Just, you referenced my book. If people want to get the book, it's on Amazon. It's called Flat Earth: Investigations into a 500-Year Heliocentric or Massive Heliocentric Lie. It's on Amazon. If you go to my websites, aplanetruth.info, P-L-A-N-E truth.info, or my other blog is Taboo, T-A-B-U, blog.com. Taboo stands for Towards a Better Understanding. There's links on CreateSpace where I think you can get the book a little cheaper. If you can click on those, and then if you like the book, I do it in both black and white and color. I think the color copy is just awesome, but I had to charge more because that's what the print-on-demand companies made me charge to be able to even get it out to all the distribution sites. So the black and white copy is excellent, but the color copy is just like you said. I think it's a coffee table book that people can just open to a page and start a discussion on, and start learning. And if we can get more books like this out and more people talking about it, I think the Great Awakening will just keep spreading exponentially, where, I think we'll get to some point, if we have enough time based on weather changes, that we can absolutely start this higher consciousness and start changing our destructive ways to cohabitating and understanding that we can't, eat money, and we can't despoil the nest that we live in. There's no other cultures that destroy the nest they live in. So, and then we have to bring down the empire. I mean, I really respect you. I just want to close with this, Paul. There's 5 criterion I use, which you cover all 5, of people I use to distinguish between true truthers, and those that are either shills, disinfo agents, trolls, or people who just don't want to get it. And the 5 subjects are: 1, flat earth; 2, Jesuits; 3, pedophiles; 4th, geoengineering; and the 5th is that we've been lied to for 500 years, and the lie is ending, and we have to bring down the empire. We can't change the government. Government means to rule. Ment is for mental. Government means mind control. We have to reclaim the author of our own authority. We have to become our own independent higher being, higher consciousness, and tap into our own powers first before we can go and tell anybody else how life is, how the world works, or anything else. And once we get that down, there's no stopping what we're able to do as a collective consciousness. But first, we have to empower ourselves and have to break free of these chains. We have, taxes is slavery. I don't care who you talk to. Taxation is slavery. Giving money to somebody you've never met and they'll put you in jail if you don't. Everybody says the same thing. I'll go to jail if I don't pay my taxes. Well, that's just like putting a gun to somebody's head and go work in the cotton fields. But very few people think like that. But that's, how we go bomb all these brown people. That's how the rich just take our money and going to electronic currency. They've got our heads down, tapping on these devices and not looking up. So look up, see the geoengineering, speak about flat Earth, expose the pedophiles, talk about the Jesuits, and let's change the world for the better for our children. Because if we don't, our children don't have a chance. And that's what I weigh with a heavy heart every day is the pedophiles. You get into the whole culturing of children for their satanic, sick pedophilia through the presidents, through the British royalty, through the Vatican, Pizzagate. Just look at Pizzagate, folks. I mean, it just goes on. And so I think your show, my work, all these truthers, if we're going to be truthers, we have to discuss all those subjects. And I honor, respect, and greatly appreciate you having me on the show. It's just been awesome.
It's been a lot of fun for me too. I like to end with, that was inspiring. I hope I could just take that and make that a little video. Yeah, I also want to say that, they have all the money, and they have all the power, and they have all the elite, and they're doing this programming, and they're doing it to us. So what power must we have for them to be so frightened of us? We're the insurgency. They're just the counterinsurgency. What power must we have when we can get together and harness it, that they have to do all this to keep us in track? Well, I want to sign off by encouraging you to get that Jamie W. Lee's book on the flat Earth. It was a gas for me. I spent the weekend with it. And we'll see you next time on World Beyond Belief.
Thank you, Paul.
Do stop broadcast when they say